Hashtag the weight of water. Adrian Voss had 41 monitors, and he trusted maybe 6 of them. The rest showed hallways, gates, the boathouse, the tree line along the east fence. Useful, but empty of anything that required a person's full attention. The 6 that mattered were the ones covering the west wing, and of those 6, one mattered more than the others combined. The workshop where his sister Isla had spent the last 7 years building ships that would never touch water. He had watched her for 1,400 and something evenings. He'd stopped counting around year 3, not because the number stopped meaning something, but because a number that large stops behaving like a number and starts behaving like a wall. Tonight, the workshop camera showed her at the long bench, a half-finished hull on the vise in front of her, and beside the hull, untouched, a folded slip of paper that had not been there an hour ago. Adrian sat forward. He did not know yet that the man who had left it, a new hire, hall pass barely a week old, name of Tomas Ray, was about to become the only person in 7 years his sister had spoken to on purpose. Isla Voss did not like to be surprised, and for 7 years the house had accommodated her on that point without being asked. The staff learned her rhythms the way sailors learn a coastline, by getting it wrong once, badly, and never again. They knocked twice, waited 3 seconds, and only then opened the workshop door. They did not touch the models on the shelves. They did not ask about the fire, because everyone in the house already knew, in the specific unspoken way that households absorb their worst stories and then quietly agree never to say them aloud. The fire had happened at the Voss family shipyard 7 years ago, in the Hull assembly building, on a night Isla had been working late reviewing structural tolerances on a contract nobody now mentioned by name. She had gotten out. Her hands hadn't. Neither had roughly a third of her face, which she now kept turned, out of long habit, slightly away from anyone she was speaking to, which was almost no one. The official finding was electrical fault, aging wiring, an insurance claim paid out within a year. Isla had never once, in 7 years, said whether she believed that. Tomas Ray had been hired to manage her physical therapy schedule, her medication, and the general daily logistics that kept a reclusive, chronically pained woman functioning inside a house the size of a small hotel. He had a folder of notes from the agency that ran 4 pages and told him almost nothing useful, and a first-day briefing from the house manager, a clipped, efficient woman named Priya, that told him considerably more. "She will not want you in the workshop," Priya said, walking him down the west corridor at a pace that discouraged questions. "If she's in there, you leave her tray outside the door. She'll take it when she takes it. Don't remark on the models. Don't ask about her hands unless she brings it up, which she will not. Mr. Voss reviews the wing's security footage personally, every evening, so assume everything you do in this hallway is observed and behave accordingly." "Understood," Tomas said. Priya glanced at him, the particular glance of someone recalibrating an assumption. "Most people ask why. About the cameras. It's his house," Tomas said. "And his sister. I'd probably do the same." Priya didn't smile, exactly, but something in her face loosened by a degree. "You'll do fine," she said, and left him at the workshop door. He knocked twice, waited 3 seconds, opened it. Isla was at the bench with her back to him, and she did not turn. The room smelled of cedar shavings and the specific mineral sharpness of fresh varnish. Shelves ran the length of 2 walls, each one holding ships, schooners, clippers, a 9-masted thing that looked like it had taken a year of someone's evenings. Every hole sealed inside glass, every glass bottle sealed at the neck, every ship inside its bottle in a state of permanent, protected stillness. "Your lunch," he said, and set the tray on the side table, and left without waiting for a response, because Priya had been very clear that a response was not the goal. He did this for 6 days. On the 7th, he noticed that the tray from the 6th day had been returned to the corridor with something new sitting on it, a length of thread, waxed, the kind used for rigging miniature sails, snapped clean through the middle. He didn't know what it meant, but it was information, and Tomas Ray had spent a career, 3 households before this one. each briefer than the last, each ending the same polite, unremarkable way, learning that information offered without explanation was usually a test, and that the correct response to a test was rarely to ask what it meant. He went to a hobby shop 40 minutes from the estate on his day off and bought a spool of the same weight thread, 3 colors, and left it on her tray the next morning with no note at all. The tray came back empty that evening, thread and all. And the ship on the bench, a 2-masted brig, hull painted, rigging half-strung, had progressed. Not finished. Progressed. He counted that as a conversation. Adrian watched the thread exchange twice through the recorded footage before he understood what he was looking at. And once he understood, he sat very still in the dark control room for a long time. His sister had broken a piece of rigging on purpose. He was almost sure of it. The snap was too clean, too deliberate, to be an accident from a woman who had spent 7 years developing hand strength specifically so that broken things stopped being a daily humiliation. She had broken it, put on the tray, and waited to see what the new hire would do with a problem he hadn't been told about and hadn't been asked to solve. And he had solved it. Correctly. Without asking why. Adrian pulled the personnel file on Tomas Ray and read it twice. 3 prior households, each employment ending in under a year, each termination logged as position concluded with no further detail. The specific bureaucratic blankness of a story nobody wanted to write down. He made a note to have it looked into and set the note aside in the folder where he kept the things he intended to verify before acting on them. A folder that had grown considerably thicker over the years than the number of things he'd actually acted on. He told himself this was ordinary diligence. New employee, sensitive posting, reasonable caution. He did not examine, that night, why watching his sister return a spool of thread to a stranger's tray had put something in his chest that felt uncomfortably close to hope. The uncle's name was Desmond Voss, and he came to the house roughly twice a year, always with reasonable-sounding business, always leaving Adrian with the specific unease of man checking whether a lock has been tampered with. Desmond had run the shipyard's insurance and risk division at the time of the fire. He had personally signed off on the electrical fault finding. He had, in the 18 months following the settlement, quietly restructured his ownership stake in 3 subsidiary companies in a way that Adrian's forensic accountant, engaged 4 years ago, paid in cash, sworn to confidentiality, had spent considerable time and money failing to fully untangle, though what they had untangled was suggestive enough that Adrian had never stopped pulling the thread. What he didn't have, and had never had, was Isla. Not her account of the night. Not even her opinion on the official finding. In 7 years, she had discussed the fire with no one, including, especially, her own brother, who had tried exactly once in year 2 and had watched her leave the room and not come out of the workshop for 4 days and had never tried again, telling himself the silence was mercy when it was, if he was honest with himself in the particular late hours when honesty became unavoidable, also a kind of relief. A live case built entirely on documents was a case he could work on alone, at his own pace, without ever having to sit across from his sister and ask her to relive the worst night of her life for the sake of a legal filing. He had been telling himself that for 5 years. He was still telling himself that the evening he watched on the workshop camera, his sister turned from the bench, looked directly at Tomas Ray, who had come in to check her evening dosage, and say, in a voice Adrian had not heard used for a full sentence in longer than he wanted to calculate, "You picked the wrong red for the hull trim." Tomas looked at the ship. "It's the closest they had." "It's wrong," Isla said, "but it's close." She turned back to the bench. "You can come in without knocking twice. Once is enough." It was, by any reasonable measure, nothing. 9 words about paint. Adrian sat in the dark control room and felt his throat do something he did not have a category for. The models, Tomas came to understand over the following weeks, were not decoration. They were a record. Each one. Isla mentioned once, offhand, while he was recalibrating her medication schedule, and she was fitting a mast into a hull with tweezers and a patience he found himself genuinely admiring, corresponded to a real ship, a real Voss maritime vessel, built at the yard, launched, given a working life. She built them in order. She said, currently 7 ships behind where the actual fleet's build record stood, because the 9th ship on the list, the one that would have been under construction the year of the fire, she had started 4 times and finished none of them. Why? Tomas asked, and immediately understood, from the particular stillness that came over her hands, that was the wrong question, or the right question asked far too soon. She didn't answer. She put down the tweezers and left the room, and he understood, correctly, this time, that leaving her tray outside the door that evening rather than knocking was the right call. But 3 days later, when he brought the morning tray, there was a small, folded square of sandpaper sitting on the shelf beside ship number 8, positioned exactly where ship number 9's hull would have gone if she'd ever kept one on display. He understood it, eventually, as an answer to a question he hadn't been given permission to ask directly. The 9th ship's keel had been laid the same month as the fire. She had never been able to finish it, because finishing it meant thinking about what the fire had actually been, rather than what everyone had agreed to call it. He didn't say any of this back to her. He just started, very quietly, buying the parts for a hull the same specifications as ship number 9, and leaving them, unassembled, in the space on the shelf where it would eventually go, not pushing her toward it, just making it possible the way you leave a door unlocked without saying anything about what's behind it. Desmond Voss's visits had always followed a pattern, and the pattern was the thing Adrian had learned, over years of watching, to actually pay attention to not the visits themselves, which were social currency, but the timing. Desmond came when something in the house had shifted. Adrian had never been able to prove this exactly, because something shifted wasn't the kind of evidence you could put in front of a judge, but the correlation tracked privately over 5 years, held with a consistency that made it feel less like a pattern and more like an instinct that had simply learned to read a room from 200 miles away. Desmond called 2 days after the sandpaper appeared on a shelf. He said, in the area. He'd love to stop by, see how Isla was doing, catch up with Adrian properly. It had been too long, hadn't it, since they'd really talked. Adrian said of course, and hung up, and sat with the specific cold clarity that had gotten him through the 5 hardest years of his life. If Desmond had noticed something changing in the house from 200 miles away, then whatever was changing was real, and it was moving faster than Adrian's own case against him. He called his accountant that night. I need the shipyard filings finalized, he said. Whatever's not ready, make it ready. I think we're out of time to be careful. The accountant, a methodical woman named Reyes who had spent 4 years being paid to be careful, was quiet for a moment. The case is strong on the money, she said finally. It has never been strong on the fire. Without her account, Desmond's lawyers tear the financial pattern apart as coincidence. You know this. I know it, Adrian said. Then you know what you actually need. He did. He had known it for 5 years and built an entire elaborate architecture of documents and deferred conversations specifically so he wouldn't have to walk down the hall and ask his sister to say out loud what he already believed had happened to her. Isla found the hull pieces on the shelf on a Tuesday and did not touch them for 4 days. On the 5th day, Tomas came in with the evening tray and found her sitting on the workshop floor, back against the workbench, the unassembled hull pieces spread in front of her on a cloth, arranged not for construction, but for looking at, the way a person lays out photographs of somewhere they haven't been able to make themselves visit. He set the tray down and didn't leave. I know why you put these here, she said, without looking up. I didn't put them there to make you build anything, he said. I put them there, so it will be possible if you wanted to. Those aren't the same. She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the light was doing the particular thing November light does, going gold and thin and low all at once. The official report says electrical fault, she said. Aging wiring in the hull assembly building. Everyone in this family has said it enough times that some of them probably believe it now. Do you believe it? I was standing 11 feet from where it started, she said. There's no wiring at 11 feet. There's a supply closet. I know because I opened it 4 minutes before, looking for a replacement bolt. It was locked. It had been locked for 2 years because nobody used it We'd moved that stock to the north building. It wasn't locked when it went up. She looked at her hands, the ones the fire had left permanently, unmistakably marked. Somebody unlocked a closet nobody used for minutes before a fire started in a building that had passed an electrical inspection 6 weeks earlier. I've had 7 years to not say that out loud. I'm very good at not saying it. Tomas sat down on the floor across from her, which was not something the job description covered, and which he did anyway. You don't have to say it to me, he said. But there's a version of this where you say it to someone whose job is to do something with it. And I think you already know who that is. And I think you already know he's been waiting a very long time for you to be the one to bring it up, because he didn't think he had the right to ask. Isla looked at him for a long moment, the look of someone recalculating a number they'd been treating as fixed. How would you know that? Because I've watched him check on you through camera for 4 hours a night for 6 weeks, Tomas said, and I've never once seen him come through this door. Adrian was in the control room when the workshop door opened at 9:40 that evening. His sister's door, not the corridors, the interior one that led from the workshop directly toward the hallway to the main house, a door that had not opened from that side in longer than he could accurately remember. He watched on the hallway camera his sister walk toward the stairs. Alone, slowly, because 7 years of scar tissue and old pain didn't move fast, but with the specific, unmistakable directionality of someone who knew exactly where she was going. He met her at the bottom of the stairs, because some instinct got him out of the control room and down 2 flights before he'd consciously decided to move. Isla, her name in his mouth after the way he usually referred to her in his own head. The wing, the workshop, the situation felt suddenly enormous. I want to tell you about the supply closet, she said. The one at the shipyard. I think you're the only person who's actually going to do something useful with it. He stood very still, the way he stood when a piece of information landed somewhere in him that had been braced for it for years and was still, somehow, not braced enough. Okay, he said. Come sit down. Take whatever time you need. I don't need time, Isla said. I've had 7 years of time. I need you to write it down correctly, and I need you to make sure it actually reaches someone who has to listen. Desmond arrived on a Thursday, 3 days after Isla gave her statement to Reyes and a court reporter Adrian had brought to the house rather than ask his sister to go anywhere near an office building. He came with his usual ease, his usual warmth calibrated exactly to the temperature a room could be expected to tolerate, and Adrian met him at the door before he'd fully gotten out of the car. Uncle Desmond. Adrian didn't move aside to let him pass. This isn't a good time. Something in Desmond's face performed surprise a half-second too late. It's family, Adrian. I don't need a good time. I need 10 minutes. You're not getting them today. Adrian held his gaze with the specific steadiness of a man who had spent 5 years rehearsing, in his head, exactly this conversation and had never expected to feel this calm inside it. Isla gave a formal statement this week about the night of the fire, about a supply closet that was locked for 2 years and wasn't locked the night it started, about who had keys to it. He watched the words land. I think you should talk to your lawyer before you talk to me again. Desmond's face did the thing faces do when a person is recalculating an entire structure of assumptions in real time and trying not to show it. That's a serious thing to say about family, he said finally, and his voice had lost its ease. It's a serious thing that happened to family, Adrian said. 7 years ago. I think you've known that longer than anyone. Desmond left without another word, and Adrian stood in the doorway and watched the car go, and felt, for the first time in longer than he could remember, something in his chest that wasn't vigilance. The 9th ship took Isla 11 weeks to finish, longer than any of the others, and when it was done, she didn't seal it into a bottle the way she'd sealed everyone before it. She left it open on the shelf, hull exposed to the room, rigging strung but unglassed, and when Tomas asked why, she said, "The others are finished stories. I know how they end. The ship gets built, it goes to sea, it either comes home or it doesn't. But either way, I'm not inside it anymore by the time I seal the glass." She looked at the 9th ship for a long moment. This one isn't finished yet. I'm still in it. Adrian's case against Desmond took another year to complete. The financial architecture unwound slowly, the way these things do, through filings and depositions, and the particular grinding patience of people whose job was to be more patient than the person they were pursuing. But it moved, finally, with the thing it had never had before, which was a witness who had stopped agreeing to a story that wasn't true. The court proceedings would take their own time to conclude, and neither Adrian nor Isla treated the ending, when it came, as a single triumphant afternoon. It arrived instead the way most real endings do, in paperwork and phone calls, and the slow exhale of years of held breath. What Adrian remembered afterward, when he thought about that year at all, was not the final hearing. It was the evening, sometime in the middle of it, when he'd gone down to the workshop, knocked once, waited, gone in, and found Isla and Tomas at the bench together, Isla guiding Tomas's hands through the rigging of a 10th ship, a new one, started for no other reason than that she'd wanted to start it, and the workshop door standing wide open behind them for the first time in 7 years, the corridor lights spilling in, nothing hidden, nothing watched, nothing that needed to be. He didn't say anything. He just sat down in the doorway, where the light from the hall met the light from the workbench, and watched his sister build something with her own 2 hands, in the open, for the sake of nothing but wanting to. It was, he thought, the best kind of nothing he'd witnessed in 7 years.